Hey guys, it's Alicia from the Bibliophile Babes. So, like me and my sister described in our first video, we will be doing separate videos based on books we've read on our own because we do have some difference in taste in genre. So today's video I'm really excited because it's one of my favorite books. I'm going to talk about Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So I'm not really going to do a general review, just read the blurb and then give my general rating, because I feel like a lot of people have read the book and it's one of my favorite books and I really just want to talk about it. But I do give it 5 stars. I think it's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. I think even if if historical fiction isn't really your thing, I really highly suggest giving this book a try. It's amazing. I really love it. First off, I love the main idea. Both the characters, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, were kind of forced to get over their pride and prejudice to forgive each other and kind of make up for their wrongdoings towards each other, which I think is awesome because, forgiveness and understanding is great and all, but I think actions kind of speak louder than words, and I think especially on Mr. Darcy's part, he did a lot to make up for how he kind of treated Lizzie and her family, and I think that's really awesome. And I think obviously that's a great lesson, to learn. Actions do speak louder than words, and sometimes you gotta just, even if you don't want to, you have to listen. Like I said, they were kind of forced to listen to each other because it kind of came to a head, and then they became more understanding of each other's situations, and it kind of went up from there. And I think that still stands true today, especially with the civil rights movement. There's a lot of people who are very not understanding rather, and very close-minded, and I think this book would do a lot of people justice in that lesson. I also like that neither of the main characters or even the main characters' friends or family, have personalities that are accepted or typical of the time, or personalities that are really easily misunderstood. I think Lizzie is very outspoken, and she's very prideful because, especially in a time where women really weren't allowed to be like that, she felt that she had to, defend herself. And Mr. Darcy is very antisocial and comes off as really rude when he's really just afraid to get close to anybody because he doesn't trust anyone, and he was taught to only trust your family, especially since he comes from money. And I know a lot of people who are similar to Lizzie and Mr. Darcy. I myself relate to Lizzie very well, and I think that also transcends time. Another reason why this is a classic. Sometimes you have to get out of your shell, or you need someone who is opposite to you to kind of show you your faults, or your good and bad, your pros and cons, and I think that they do that very well in this book. I think Jane Austen really described that very well in their situation. So some of my favorite quotes, I only shared a few because literally almost this whole book I could quote that I love, but one of my first favorite quotes is, "I declare after all there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book. When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library." I just love that because one of the many ways that I feel connected to Lizzie Bennet is I love to read as well, and she's a very avid reader, and she put it so eloquently. I would be miserable if I did not have an amazing collection of books in my home. Me and my boyfriend, we just got a bookcase. Many of our books are still at our old place that we have to bring over here, but I told him, I was like, we need a bookcase. Not only do we need it because we need the room, but I need it because I need a place to put all my books. One of my other favorite quotes from the book is, "Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinions of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us." I just love that quote because I think it rings really true, and I think vanity and pride are very different things, and you could be proud of yourself without thinking you're the best thing in the world, and vanity does pertain more to how you want others to think of you. I think when judging a book by its cover, if you will, even judging a book when you've kind of read, you've gotten maybe a few chapters in, I think in order to get to know a person, you really need to know what you're talking about. I think if you're going to describe a person, especially someone you claim to know so very well, you should at least try to kind of build them a description that is worthy of whatever words you're using. And I know that sounds like really weird and like, I don't know, maybe I'm explaining it really weird, but I think this is kind of a rebuttal against, you know, people's judgment. And I just really like that because I think people judge too generally and too easily. Like they just kind of throw whatever words they want out there. Like women, people will just call women whores or bitches or prude or whatever. And people don't realize that like that really sticks. Even if it's not true to person, like the individual person's personality, it's just such a general thing that is like slander towards women. It's just a general description people use often of women in a negative way. And this can really hurt someone's feelings. And I think one of the reasons that Mr. Darcy was so antisocial and introverted was because so many people are judgy. Especially in the 1700s, everything was about status and money and marriage and all that, so people were especially judgy. And although it's a different time, I think that still rings true today, and I really love that quote. So another one of my favorite parts in the book, and I was gonna provide the quote, but it was very long and I would have had to write it all down and it would have taken me a very long time. But anyway, I like one of the parts in the book where Mr. Darcy is describing to Lizzie like his situation and how basically his whole life he's been taught to kind of judge and be cold because his family kind of taught him to be that way because again they have money and many people have used them, and he's traveled the world and seen a lot of horrible people and seen a lot of horrible things, so he just doesn't trust people. So he learned that pride and his money were what would get him what he needed in life, like a wife and friends. And he was basically like, it took me to learn that my vanity and pride aren't worth pleasing a woman who's worthy of being pleased. And I really like that quote because I think, especially nowadays, with social media and everything like that, so many people are focused on like face value and how they are perceived physically, that they don't often focus on building actual relationships. I think that's very general. I don't mean everyone, but I think, you know, especially like Tinder, you literally are basing who you're gonna go out on a date with or possibly have sex with based on their photo, based on what they look like. A lot of things nowadays, again with social media, is based on what you look like. And I think especially, again, with like Tinder and stuff like that, when you're trying to find a significant other or what have you, you're more worried about the things that don't matter than that do. And you're not taking a good look at yourself or a good look at that person. It's just face value. And he was taught that face value, you know, again, his money and his pride would get him where he needed to go. And then he finally met this woman who he was very taken by, and he realized that that's not how you get somebody. That's not how you make family or friends or, you know, lasting romantic relationships. I really loved that part of the book. I think it really rings true again into today. And yeah, I just think it was a very great part of the book. I also really love that the father was not the typical fatherly type that was that it was expected of men during this time period. Like, he wasn't really worried about like marrying his daughters off. He wasn't very social. Like, he really just like loved being at his house, and he loved his wife and his daughters, and he kind of just let them do what they wanted. And obviously nowadays that's pretty much the norm. You know, women are allowed to do what they want, but at least to an extent. But back then that wasn't really acceptable. And even now there's a lot of like old family traditions or really bad cultural traditions or even religious traditions where women aren't treated as fairly, or women aren't given, you know, they're not really given a voice. And I really like that the father doesn't really care how other people are judging him. He just cares about the happiness of his wife and his 5 daughters. And he just cares about like being happy. So I just really love the father, and I really love at the end of the book when Mr. Darcy went to Mr. Bennet asking for Lizzie's hand, and Mr. Bennet spoke with Lizzie, and he was like, the last thing I would ever want is for you to be in an unequal marriage. He was like, you're much too lively and smart to be in an unequal marriage. He was like, the last thing I wanted to do was marry you off into misery. Especially like back then, like divorce and stuff wasn't really a thing, so if you got married, you kind of stayed married unless they died. And he was basically like, I don't want to force you into a life that you're gonna hate, and he was like, I don't want to force you into a life that's gonna make you not be able to be who you are. And he was like, I just want you to be happy. And I love that. I love that. Like, it was, he also left it completely up to her. He was like, he was asked for your hand in marriage, but I just want to make sure that it's what you want, because if it's not, or you're not entirely sure, I'll say no. He left it up to her, and I think even nowadays, there's still that tradition where, like, the fiance has to ask the father or mother of the bride, like, for permission to propose. And, like, I get that it's kind of, nowadays it's just kind of like a thing, but, like, to me, that's kind of stupid. Like, you shouldn't be asking anyone else whether you can marry somebody except the person you want to marry. And I know maybe some of you may think that's stupid, but as a woman, I think that's ridiculous. Because especially back in those days, if the father didn't like the husband, even though it would make the daughter happy, he would very much say no. He would absolutely decline, and he wouldn't care about the daughter's happiness. He would care about whether or not she'd be able to eat. And obviously that's a very legitimate worry, but it's disgusting that society was set up in such a way anyway. But nowadays, even, you know, in the modern era, fathers are still like, oh, if you touch my daughter, I'll kill you, or blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a disgusting kind of mindset. Like, I think it's very belittling to women and daughters and sisters and cousins or what have you. Any female that is kind of put in that position, and I like that the father Mr. Bennet didn't put Lizzie in that position. He was like, he asked me for your hand in marriage basically because he has to, you know, that was the etiquette of the time, and he was like, but I want to hear from you what you want. And I really, really love that. So I'm going to stop the video here, because if I keep going on, I'm going to go over the time limit that I have for videos right now because of my photo editor, or rather my video editor. But please keep an eye out for my and my sister's combined book review on The Shining. Hopefully that will be coming out very soon. Like I said, I'm ripping through it so far. I really love it, and I can't wait to discuss it with you guys. My sister has a few reviews coming out soon too on some books that she has read. Hopefully soon we will both be doing another combined book review on another Neil Gaiman book that we have both read, and I'm really excited for it because, again, he's one of our favorite authors and we could talk about him for hours. But thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!